What's up, everybody? It's Anchorpete, and I have a special treat for you today. I am here with a friend of mine that I knew when I lived in New York, in Staten Island. It's my friend Mike Bongiorno. Mike, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
Dude, I'm doing well. I'm really happy to talk to you, and I know that you're a huge Star Wars fan like me. Mike is actually from a podcast called Pop Culture Man Children, and I'm actually going to be on that show at one point.
Yes.
But Mike, why don't you tell everybody what that show is about?
So Pop Culture Man Children is a podcast about pop culture ephemera. It is about nerd culture. We focus on movies, TV, books, video games. Honestly, not a lot of music. It's more in the real nerdy shit. We come out every single Wednesday. We've been going for about 3 years now. I host it with a sort of rogues gallery of co-hosts that come and go. Every week might be a different co-host, but they're repeat. And I think recently we've had a real good string of episodes. We had an episode on Disney's The Haunted Mansion attraction. We had an episode on the Super Mario Brothers movie, which is, by my opinion, a forgotten classic.
Yes.
We've had episodes on, Twilight Zone episode, go anywhere podcasts are found, all the places, Spotify, Stitcher, and take a look at Pop Culture Man Children, and there'll be something there. If you like Anchorpete stuff, you'll like something from PCMC. It's funny. There's so many Star Wars movies now.
Yes.
I remember distinctly, like, before you and me saw Star Wars Episode 3 together. And I remember distinctly you saying, like, dude, this is the last Star Wars movie. This is it. And how wrong we were.
Yeah. Holy shit. I kind of wish maybe that was the case. I don't know. So that's actually a perfect segue for what we're going to talk about today. So today we're talking about the High Republic, and specifically this book called Star Wars, The High Republic, Light of the Jedi. Yeah. Now, Light of the Jedi is the first book that came out from this book series. But there you go. Mike's brandishing it right there perfectly. Yes. Let's just explain what the High Republic is real quick. The High Republic is this other time frame in Star Wars that's removed from the movie timeline. And it's actually a way earlier than the movies. Right. It's 300 years before the Battle of Yavin, which is, the first Star Wars movie, A New Hope. And then it goes up to about 83 years before the Battle of Yavin. This book takes place, I believe, 237 years before A New Hope. No, 232. Okay?
Yes. There's actually supposed to be... It's a publishing initiative.
Yep.
And although there is... The Acolyte is a show that's supposed to be in the High Republic, but they haven't talked a lot about that, so we'll see.
Yeah.
But there are 3 phases: the Light of the Jedi, the Quest of the Jedi, and Trials of the Jedi, which I think are going to unravel over the next 2 years.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah. So right off the bat, I was going to ask you, man, do you like this time period from what they've set up so far?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I'm not a huge Trekkie, although I've consumed a lot of I've consumed every Star Trek movie, and I've consumed I'd say a handful of episodes of Next Gen.
Sure.
And I bring that up only because I feel like there's something Star Trekky about this time period. It's a time of expansion, and it's a time of hope. The major thing that is happening is hyperspace is happening, and it's almost like the Oregon Trail. It's creating a whole new galaxy, and that reminded me very much of Star Trek for some reason.
Yes, yeah, I think it's a good comparison. They multiple times when they describe this book and this whole initiative, they talk about it as if it's like the frontier. It's like the final frontier, and they treat the Outer Rim like it's unexplored territory, whereas in the original trilogy, it's much more established, right?
It's just a slum that no one gives a crap about.
Yeah, pretty much. And so the book that we're talking about right now, you're talking about hyperspace. There's a disaster that happens in hyperspace in the very beginning of this book.
Yeah.
And it was kind of cool to see this disaster take place and how it like affected the galaxy at that time. And from a storytelling point of view, I think it's a great way to start off a book. It's very dramatic.
Yeah.
And Charles Soule does this job where he basically introduces a whole bunch of characters and then just like kills them off, right?
Yeah. I think Charles Soule had a hard job here because this is book 1 of the High Republic. I think currently there are 3 out, 4 if you count a children's book.
Yeah.
And he had to create a novel that stands on its own.
Yes.
But also create for us what they call the Great Disaster, which is the inciting incident for this entire time period.
Right.
Which is what you were just talking about. A huge galaxy-wide disaster that basically, if everyone in the galaxy has all of this hope for this new world of, you know, hyperspace exploration, this becomes a wrench in that cog. It's basically like, yeah, but with that could come something very disastrous, something worse than you could possibly imagine.
Yeah, yeah. And the initial idea that they were leading to, the reason why these people were even traveling to the Outer Rim is because they were going to set up a new base, the Starlight Beacon, right? And they use that in all the advertising for the High Republic, right? It's got this cool logo.
Yes.
When you look at it on YouTube, if you ever watch any of the cool Star Wars videos, which you shared with me, it shows like the Starlight Beacon, and it does almost like a lighthouse kind of swivel. I love that. It goes across the title.
It's the opposite Death Star. Whereas the Death Star was meant to be this gigantic space station that when you saw it, you would see the might of the Empire and quake in fear. This is supposed to do the opposite. It's supposed to make you inspired at the possibilities of the Republic.
Yeah.
So it functions in the same way, part symbolic, part actually functional. It's kind of like Epcot inside. It has a lot of BS. You know?
Right.
There's like a little Jedi temple and then like some exhibits. But it's the way I think of it is opposite Death Star.
Yeah, dude, that is a great freaking comparison. I didn't even think of that. That's awesome. So they're establishing that the Jedi are reaching out, and they're going to reach out into the Outer Rim, and they're going to have a presence in the Outer Rim at this station. This great disaster occurs. And by the way, we're going to go into spoilers for this book. So if you haven't read the book at this point, you know, maybe go read it, then come back. But right away, you just establish that this disaster happens. It's unprecedented. There's things just coming out of hyperspace and crashing into places where there's people, and they're just wiping them out. And then the Jedi show up. And you have the Jedi that you just talked about on the cover, Avar Kriss, and she's able to kind of rally all these Jedi from different points, and they use the Force together, right?
Yeah.
And like, what do you think, Mike, of the Jedi of this time period versus the Jedi in, say, the prequels?
Well, the Jedi of this time period is more aligned to the Jedi that I imagined as a little kid in the 90s watching the films on VHS.
Yeah, yeah.
They feel more authoritarian. They feel to have a more easy relationship with the Republic than what we see in the prequels.
Yeah.
And what's most interesting to me is they don't feel uniform. It feels like everyone dresses different, everyone acts different, people use the Force differently. One of the characters describes their lightsaber as the ugliest lightsaber they've ever seen. And then somebody else wears like gold duds, and then somebody else, you know, like it seems like they're encouraged by the Jedi Order at this time to kind of, they're almost like scholars, kind of like go and do your own thing.
To me, there's like two different camps of Star Wars. There's the people that just want to see the original trilogy over and over again. And that's why they love Rogue One so much, because it's just like, oh, look, it's the people from Mos Eisley. They're right here. You know, and, oh, there's a Death Star, right? Then there are people that are like, we need to do something different. We need to change things up. Like, the reason why Star Wars is so good is because Empire Strikes Back isn't Star Wars 2. It's like a new story. There's new worlds, new characters. You need to like add a little extra details each time to make it interesting.
And people don't remember that when The Empire Strikes came out, there were some negative reviews.
Oh, yeah.
That sound like some of the reviews you hear now.
Yeah.
Oh, you ruined Star Wars. Why is it about this now? Why isn't it about that?
Yeah.
I get really bothered when people have conversations about what is and isn't Star Wars.
Yeah.
Right? You hear that all the time. That's not Star Wars. To me, if Star Wars is a stable definition that can't change, there's no point in making new Star Wars anything.
Right. You need to
has to change.
Yeah. There always has to be little details because it's like you have all the stuff that's in A New Hope, right? And then all of a sudden, like, you introduce Yoda and, Hoth and there's Imperial walkers.
Yeah.
It's like each chapter brings its own thing that goes on that poster, right? That mosaic.
Right.
And if you like, that's why I get so bummed out by the sequel trilogy, because so much of the designs and stuff are just the original trilogy over again. It's like, give me new ships, give me new looking characters and troops and stuff.
Right, exactly.
It's like, especially
that's what's exciting to me about the High Republic is because it's publishing and fewer people read than they see films.
Right.
They seem to have an autonomy to do different things with this series.
Yes. And so, like, they introduced new villains, and I feel like Marciano, I feel like he's a pretty compelling villain too.
Yes, I agree. There's so much world building in this book. Actually, it's a very dense book. I've read it twice now, and
holy shit.
I had to take notes for talking to you today because I was saying to myself, wait, what was a cloud?
Yeah. Like, it reminds me of the old canon of Star Wars, because essentially, like, from the end of Return of the Jedi up until they sent out the prequels, it was like anyone could kind of tell whatever story they wanted, and there wasn't a lot of Star Wars out there. There were no movies. There was like the Ewoks cartoon, the Droids cartoon, and then people started to build up this new concept. That's where Coruscant comes from. Is from the Heir to the Empire book, and it's just that world building and building on top of Star Wars. I miss that. Yeah,
and I'm not familiar with that stuff. I mean, I'm familiar as a fan, but other than Shadows of the Empire, I was not a big reader of the old canon.
Sure.
But I do know, just as being a Star Wars fan, that it seems like they've pilfered a lot of that and brought it into new canon.
They have, yes.
Like Thrawn.
Yes.
Is now somehow is repurposed, and so it's interesting. Even who's that bunny from the comics?
Yeah, he looks like Bucky O'Hare.
Yeah, like he's back.
Yeah, I don't know what the hell his name is, but yeah. What is he? Is he in a comic or something?
I think he's in one of the newer comics now.
Well, let me ask you this: what new canon books or comics have you read? Is it just this, or is there other stuff?
Oh no, I've read a lot. Lost Stars is my favorite Star Wars book ever.
Yeah, is that Claudia Gray or is that someone else?
Claudia Gray, the Queen. Claudia Gray is my favorite Star Wars author.
Yeah,
she wrote a book called Master and Apprentice, which was about Qui-Gon, my least favorite Star Wars character, and I still love that book. She is Claudia Gray. Anything by Claudia Gray, I would read. So yeah, I've read Lost Stars. I've read what was that Rebels book about Kanan Jarrus?
Was it called like not A New Hope, but it was like
New Dawn, New Horizon, something.
New Dawn. Because people thought that was going to be the title of episode 7 when it came out.
Right.
Yeah.
I read the Last Shot, which was a Han Solo. Novel.
Yeah.
I've read a handful of stuff. I haven't read any of the Jyn Erso stuff because Rogue One was not my jam.
Yeah. We're on the same page. Like, buy subscribers. So it's all good. It's all good.
Leia, Princess of Alderaan. There are 2 great Princess Leia books by Claudia Gray. The first one is Leia, Princess of Alderaan, which is her as a kid, and then the other one is Bloodline, which is her right before The Force Awakens.
Yeah.
And it is, if you like the character of Leia, read those 2 books because it is a beautiful picture of this character's life.
That's awesome. Well, so you've actually named a bunch of books that I have not read. As far as like new canon goes, there was this really great book with like Vader and Palpatine where they crash on a planet. I think it was called Lords of the Sith, I think.
Okay, yeah.
So I read that, and then I read when Chuck Wendig wrote like the first Aftermath book. I read that, and I was not a fan of that at
I
all.
didn't finish it. I hate to say it.
Yeah.
I didn't finish it.
It was bad, I thought.
It felt more like a canon Bible than an actual book. It felt like The Force Awakens was coming out, and they were like, here are all the gaps you have to fill for our film to make sense. So he had all of this homework.
Yeah.
And it's not I don't know. I've heard that the other two books are better, but I couldn't finish that book.
Yeah. There was one thing that really bothered me in that book, which was they kind of like people would quote things from Star Wars, and it'd be like, wait, did you watch the Star Wars movies? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like they would say things like that Han Solo would say, and I'm like, wait, why are you saying this? You're like a random. Just that pissed me off. But I just didn't think the writing was that good too. Sorry, Chuck Wendig. But like, I did read. There was like a Rogue One prequel that I thought was really good. It was written by James Luciano, and it was called Catalyst. And I liked that. And I liked that Sith book that I was telling you about. And then I really liked this. So what I was thinking with the new canon books is that when they're so close to the movies, it's like they can't really do much. And then they bring on these characters that maybe aren't in the movies, and then they're not interesting, right?
Right.
Whereas with the old canon, you could have stories featuring Luke and Leia and Han, but then you're worried about if they're going to die or not because it's after the movies.
Right.
So I just felt like a lot of filler and not exciting because you know what's going to happen.
And a lot of the new canon books are they're truly marketing. I mean, a lot of them will have a banner that says "Journey to" whatever the next film is. Right. So like it could be a novel about who knows anything, but it'll say "Journey to the Last Jedi," and by that it means there'll be like one scene where they're on Anchorpete. Right. Or there'll be like a fathier in it. It'll be like one little thing. Like I'm thinking specifically of the Legends of Luke Skywalker book.
Okay.
That's part of the journey to. So a lot of it was meant to be, synergy and marketing. And I don't think, the best books come out of that when it's meant to just be an advertisement for a forthcoming film. Right.
And so I think that's what makes the difference between those books and this new initiative.
Right.
Because this new initiative is not building up to some movie. It's just they're all interconnected and playing off of each other.
Right.
And I saw these videos, that you showed me where like Justina Ireland, she wrote another one of these books. It's called A Test of Courage. And then there's this other one written by Claudia Gray. Oh, look at that. Okay, you got it right there. By the way, I showed that book to my daughter. I was at Barnes & Noble right before we started this, right?
Yeah.
I showed that book to my daughter, Pepper, who's 10. And I was like, hey, you want to buy this, right? And then she's like, what? Who would want to read a book about Republicans? I was like, it's the High Republic, baby. But yeah. So Into the Dark by Claudia Gray, that's another one too. And they've kind of come together almost like a writer's room on a TV show where they're just like bouncing ideas off each other. Like, oh, what do you think for this character? And I just love that. I eat that stuff up.
Now, there's also comic books related, which I'm somebody who I have a terrible memory, so I never go month to month. I usually will go and buy trades.
Trades, yeah.
So I know there's like 2 comic books going right now that I haven't been reading.
Yeah,
there's one that's about Yoda and a bunch of like younglings, which they reference quickly in this book.
They do.
When you read this book, you're kind of like, "Where's Yoda?" Because Yoda would be alive, and they're kind of like, "Yeah, he's off doing a comic book." And then there's some other High Republic book that I have not read yet. So far I'm okay. I feel like it will get to a point where it'll become unwieldy.
Yeah.
And it might be hard to keep up with.
I was gonna say, are you familiar with Charles Soule at all or no?
No, I've not read anything else by this author.
Okay, so Charles Soule is mainly a comic book writer, but he's written I think he's written 2 other novels besides this, and they're not Star Wars novels. Star Wars, there's one thing I want to kind of correct myself on, which is that the Star Wars comics by Marvel are very, very good. So
that's new canon.
Yeah, and that's new canon, right? They have like multiple Darth Vader series. One was written by like Kieran Gillen, one was written by Charles Soule, and they are so good. Mm-hmm. Like one of the things that the old canon books did so well was that they could take characters that are kind of lame in the prequels and make them very complex, very interesting. And they've done that with Anakin. Because we all have our expectations of what Anakin is. We know what Anakin is supposed to be based on what we've been told about him, but the movies don't really portray him in that great a light, right?
No, right.
And so then you have the Clone Wars cartoon, and you have these comics that I've just told you about, and they, oh my God, they make Anakin like so compelling.
Yeah. That's a lot of what that stuff was.
Yes.
I mean, look at a character like Darth Maul.
Yeah.
So much of what that character is comes outside of episode 1, really.
Right, exactly. I was going to ask you, is there a particular Jedi that you like a lot out of this new batch?
Okay. Yeah, I think Elzar Mann.
Elzar Mann, okay.
Elzar Mann is described as a tinkerer with the Force. They say he never uses the Force the same way twice. He's a Jedi Knight, not a Jedi Master, although he's been around long enough to be a Master, but because of his unorthodox methodology with the Force, they won't make him a Master. And he's also, again, this is a spoiler, he seems to be a romantic link to Avar Kriss. Obviously, they're going by the Jedi Code, but it's very clear that they're romantically attracted to one another in the book.
Yeah.
So he stood out to me as a very cool.
If I had to pick one, I'd pick Loden Greatstorm, right?
Yeah.
The way that they have, like the narrator, the guy that does the audiobook, he gives him this sort of gravitas, and he gives him this kind of deep voice, and he's just kind of a badass. And spoilers, he gets captured by the end of the book, and usually when you're reading Star Wars canon that you're not into, you're like, I don't care, it's just a disposable character. I want to know what happens to him now.
Right. It's a very dark ending too, because he's not just captured, but he's kept in a ship surrounded by other prisoners, and those prisoners are being tortured. And they did nothing wrong. His captor is using their suffering to keep Loden Greatstorm. He says, you don't imprison a Jedi with bars, you imprison him with pain. So he's literally creating suffering all around him to imprison him. It's very dark. That goes back to this other character, Marshawn Rowe, very dark villain, which I like.
Yes.
Like there's some messed up stuff.
Yeah. And with him, it's all still a mystery too, because they allude to things about his past that we don't really know about yet. There's something with his family that they're gonna unravel, and it'll be interesting. But they're saying that his family is somehow connected to the Jedi.
Yeah. Well, he at the end he does a villain monologue.
Yeah.
Explains that he was behind everything that happened in the book.
Yeah.
And he wanted to capture a Jedi. We don't yet know why. He even says to Loden, you'll see eventually.
Yeah.
But yeah, so there's something there. There's some. He refers to his past, and him and his father both ran away from their past. So
yeah,
family in Star Wars is always a thing.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And somehow his family has gotten possession of this item too. And like, as someone that's read it twice, I was kind of hoping maybe you could explain to me what this item is. And then also another thing too, like, what does he do specifically that makes them win that battle? Because in the end, what happens is, just for people that maybe haven't read the book but are still listening, there's a space battle, and the Nihil are losing. His faction is losing. And then all of a sudden he does this thing where ships just start jumping in and out of hyperspace, like real quick.
It looked like they're like appearing and disappearing all over.
Yeah. So what did he do?
Well, he has on his ship, which is called the Electric Gaze, which is a very Philip K. Dick name.
Yeah, I agree.
On his ship, he has Mari Santika, who would be an ancestor of Lars Santika, Max von Sydow from Force Awakens.
Yeah.
And she's a very upsetting character. She's over 100 years old. She's barely alive. She's kept in soup, like Bacta is only now being cultivated, so it's like before Bacta, and basically she will she can see hyperspace in her mind. So he uses her to get what he calls the paths. And the paths are all of these backdoor secret ways through hyperspace, which is what allows this group, I always say Nihil, because I think nihilism. The Nihil, their ability to, pilfer the universe. So I think at the end, he's using the paths to this really hyper-specific ability of literally making ships. It looks like they're popping in and out of existence, but they're actually jumping through hyperspace in these very, very narrow little lanes. Hyperspace is it takes you far away. That's the point. But he's actually just making the ships bounce around on the battlefield.
Yeah.
Which completely throws the Jedi. The Jedi have no idea what's happening.
Yeah. And that almost makes me feel like it's a response to the Rise of Skywalker, because there's something they do in that movie which they've never done in any other Star Wars movie, which is hyperspace skipping.
Yes.
And so it's just jumping real quick, so in this case they use it as a military tactic, and they're able to wipe out this fleet using it, and it's real scary because people can't predict it, and his own men, he's making his own men crash and die too. So he doesn't care. He's very ruthless.
Right.
And,
sorry.
And he has this device too, which looks like a skull. It's this sort of metallic stone object. And when he's talking to Loading Greatstorm, it starts to glow purple. Right.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, you got it. That's all they've given us so far. He just takes it out. We know it has something to do with the Jedi. We know it has something to do with his past. I imagined it as almost like a cylinder, almost like the a lightsaber, but not a lightsaber. It's a stone, and we're told it looks like it was melted and made again.
Right.
And it has engravings in it of skulls and stuff.
Right.
So we have no idea yet what that is.
But it's given him some kind of power.
Yeah. There's a lot more to know about where this character comes from. Yeah.
And then just while we're talking about the bad guys, I think there's actually a whole nother enemy that is going to come into this too, which is almost kind of like the xenomorphs from Alien. I've seen them in the marketing and stuff where it looks like there's some kind of dark creature. And in the end of this book, you said that it ended on a dark note. One of the characters has a vision of the future.
Yeah.
And he has this vision of Jedi evacuating and leaving. And I think it's because of these creatures. Do you know what I'm talking about? Or
yes, it's Elzar Mann. They're having a kind of, I guess it's a celebration. It's the opening, I think, of the Starlight Beacon.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he's looking out a window and he gets this vision of, it's actually very cool for the first book in the series because it's so ominous. He gets a vision. It reminds me of the vision Tony Stark has.
Yes.
In Ultron. It's some horrible stuff is yet to come.
So in the book, Avar Kriss has this moment where she's connected to all these other Jedi, and she can see how they perceive the Force. And she sees that one person sees it like music, and other, or is she the one that sees it like music?
She sees it like music.
She sees like music.
She even centers herself by she will levitate her lightsaber and make it spin, and the high-pitched hum of it spinning, that'll center her. Yeah, she actually wrote this down. She sees it as music. Avar Kriss, she's Avar Kriss. Elzar Mann sees it as a deep ocean. The young Padawan Wookiee, Buryaga Agaburi, he sees it as a tree. Life is one big tree, and we are all little leaves on it. And Loden Greystorm sees it as the wind, which I think would be my answer. I think I've always seen the Force as like the wind.
Okay.
How do you see the Force?
Sure. Okay, so the way that I perceive the Force is kind of like, when Professor X uses Cerebro in the X-Men movies?
Yeah.
And there's it's everyone's there and everyone is like a glowing dot, but then mutants kind of stick out brighter.
Yeah.
I feel like it's like that, where it's like this kind of web that connects everyone, and that people have individual glows, right? Because Yoda says, he's like, luminous beings are we, right? So I've always pictured that like we kind of look like Academy Awards, but we're like of light, right?
Yeah.
And I thought that like maybe when a person has their lightsaber and their lightsaber crystal, maybe that color that you've picked represents the color that you kind of shine.
Ooh, yeah.
Right. And then I thought, here's my last thing of my little fan fiction was, what if like a Sith, their color is red in the Force, and that's why there's a reason why their blades are red in canon, but like I was like, maybe that's why their blades are red.
Yeah.
And their eyes are red too, right?
Right.
So that was kind of like my little fan fiction. But I loved that about this book because it made me think of Star Wars in a different way. And I always
want.
Yeah.
I will, again, I'm not trying to lose you followers here. But I'll never understand when somebody only wants what they've had before.
Yeah.
Especially given, as you said, every movie gave you something different. The Empire gave us something that New Hope didn't. Return of the Jedi gave us something that Empire didn't.
Right.
Yeah, I when I could come away thinking about Star Wars in a different way, and I've been thinking about Star Wars since I was 12 years old, right? Yeah. So if I could come away thinking about it in a totally different way, even thinking about lightsabers in a different way, I think they do some interesting things with lightsabers in this book. Like it becomes part of their ship. Like it's like a key in their ship. Like cool. Like the 12-year-old in me is like, that's awesome.
Yeah. Shit, yeah.
Yeah. I do love it. And it also speaks to what you were saying before about how they're all different. They're not sort of homogenized and sort of taught to be exactly the same and think exactly the same and wear the same robes. It seems like they all imagine the Force differently.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's why this is just such a refreshing story. And it's a time period that we can stay in and get to know these characters more. And like you're saying that Elzar Mann is your guy that you kind of want to follow through. Yeah. And then I kind of want to learn more about Loden Greatstorm. Yeah. And the thing is that like in the original canon, they eventually had this initiative called the New Jedi Order, right? Mm-hmm. Where the Jedi took on a new threat, which is called the Yuzan Vong. And just like the Nihil, it was a new threat that wasn't the Sith, right? It was like this new thing. And the cool thing about the New Jedi Order was that you would follow these new Jedi and some of them would die. So there was this real tension. That's what's going to happen with this too. Not all these characters are going to live. Some of them died in this book.
Right, exactly. No, it's no, that is interesting because what if I'm reading a book about Han Solo, it might be a whole new story and I might love it. But guess what? Han Solo is going to survive because I've already seen him die.
Yeah.
Right? If I'm reading a prequel book to some, I pretty soon they're going to have the first Mandalorian prequel books, obviously, right?
Yeah.
But guess what? I know that the Mandalorian lives. Yeah. Right? I know that he eventually meets Baby Yoda. Like, these are all new characters. They might die. I have no idea where they're going.
Yeah.
The only thing I could say for sure is that Yoda will not die.
Right. Exactly.
Everyone else, they could all die. I have no idea.
Yeah, they probably will.
And the new ships, you got to share some of these new ships with your viewers. Like, the long beams.
Right.
And then the vectors, which are the little Jedi starfighters, which are described as having they're just tin cans. They have no defenses. The Jedi are the defenses. Like they're designed to any little, turbulence, you'll feel it, so the Jedi will know what the ship is doing. Like all of this stuff, I found myself when I was reading it, because it's not an illustrated book. I found myself when I was reading it, Googling, like, there's got to be an image of this. I want to know what this looks like. Or Marchion Ro. Marchion Ro wears a mask, as many of the villains do in all Star Wars, right? I found myself Googling to sort of get an image of it. It's really cool stuff. It looks like Star Wars Z, but it doesn't look like what you've seen before.
And that's what we needed more of in the sequel trilogy. Like just more innovation.
I guess one last thing I wanted to say, and I want to bring out the book for this because I want to look at it. Something I'm really, my master's is in film and media studies, so I'm very into aesthetics. I feel like the aesthetics, take a look at this. The aesthetics of the High Republic are a spring, right? And I think, it's about things blossoming. Even the Hetzel system, which is where a lot of this takes place, it's an agricultural system. It's where things are growing. It's like the spring, it's spring looking, but it's also like the spring of Star Wars. Whereas I think if you look at the original trilogy as the winter, it's dark. The Death Star is gray. So I think, I don't know if that's just my read, but it seems like the aesthetic that they've chosen, even just for the High Republic, title, it seems very spring.
Interesting.
And it's an interesting, because with spring makes you think of new life and stuff. I think it was a smart, it's a smart tonal choice, I think.
Sure. Wow, that is interesting. I never even thought of that at all. I do love the overall design. They've clearly put a lot of thought into it.
I'm excited to keep reading. I'm excited to keep seeing, Claudia Gray has a few books coming out. And she, like I said, she's my favorite. So I really want to see what she does with it.
Yeah. Would you come back on here and talk about Into the Dark with me?
Sure, absolutely.
And then if you finish that book that's about Republicans over there.
Sure.
Yeah, because I actually got that one from the library, so maybe we can talk about that one too.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I had an idea a long time ago, which is I just wanted to talk about new Star Wars lore. I wanted to call it this is right when The Mandalorian came out. I wanted to call it Man, New Lore, Ian. But I didn't have any friend named Ian, but it would have been perfect.
You have to go and make a friend named Ian.
Yeah. It would have been awesome if your name was Ian. I could have made a logo and shit, but it's all good. So
thank you so much for having me on. You're the only other person I know who's reading this series. Actually, you're the only person I know that reads Star Wars books.
Yeah.
So I'm always excited to come on, and whenever you want, I'll come on and talk about it. And I'm excited to have you on my podcast, PCMC.
Yeah. Why don't we plug that too? Why don't we tell them what we're going to talk about?
We're going to talk about the new Power Rangers comics.
Yes.
Which, how do you describe them? Imagine taking the canon of Power Rangers and not changing it, but just making it better. Yep. Just being how about in between those stupid episodes, there were actually interesting things happening.
Yeah.
It really grew with its fan base, because if it were like the show, you'd be like, this is not very interesting.
No.
But it doesn't negate the show. It's really interesting.
It's incredible because it's a lot of times they'll try to do a dark new reboot of something. They'll take something as serious Power Rangers and make it it's serious, and it is pretty serious. But the characters don't talk differently. The scenarios they're in are not different from the scenarios they've been in the show. It's it's kind of like taking a mature comic, not like a dark comic, but say a Spider-Man or an X-Men comic, and applying it to Power Rangers.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. So then I will be on your show in the end of March, and then as soon as I finish reading some more of these Star Wars books, we'll get you back on here.
Yes. Pop Culture Man Children, available anywhere podcasts are found.
And Mike, I will put a link to it in the description below too.
Great. Fantastic.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks so much, man.
Thank you for having me.